I can come to a point where I say, well, my game is to end this conversation about good and bad in the world because it just doesn't work. Like we relate to the bad peoples as if they weren't human. And I
Mm.
think, this not relating to someone as a human being is the big problem. And I started to relate to people as a fellow human being.
Welcome to Landmark Difference Makers, where we interview people making a remarkable difference around the world. Get ready to be inspired. Let's jump in.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is another episode of Landmark Difference Makers, and I'm here today with my co-host, Christine McCormick-Harris. My name's Seamus Ford. Christine, I've been looking forward to this interview for quite a while. We're actually going to be addressing something that's current in the news. There's a really remarkable person we're talking to today, Angelika Schlauß, who...
Yes, I had the pleasure of meeting her earlier.
You may not know, she's a former Landmark staff member. She's a program leader with Landmark, leads the Self-Expression Leadership Program, the program I led for many, many years. She has become involved in an organization called We're All Ukrainians. It's concerned for Ukrainian children that have been relocated to Russian territory during the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And it's a pretty remarkable story. Angelika and the people that she is working with are really doing remarkable work. So why don't we just go ahead and get started?
Yes.
Angelika, how are you?
Well, I'm excited and a bit nervous.
Oh, well.
I don't get interviewed all day, every day.
Okay. Well, I think your nerves will go away pretty quickly.
Mhm.
The first thing I want to start with is what is happening? What do people need to know about what has happened over the course of this conflict, particularly with the Ukrainian children that you're concerned for?
Yes, well, so I first got to know of this like in September 2022 when my German organization started to collect evidence and proof and data around this subject and started to write a book and also to like really collect the facts so that a lawsuit could be issued. And what we got to know was that Ukrainian children were taken like in large numbers out of their hometowns, out of school. Parents were told that this was a great vacation camp and just to get the kids like out of the immediate war zones and have them relax and, take good care of them. And then they never returned.
Mm.
And
I can't imagine what that's like for a parent of one of these children.
yes.
Sorry, you were saying.
Pardon?
You said and. Was there something else you wanted to add there?
Well, it started with, I don't know how many children, but right now there is data that it's about 20,000 children that have been taken away. And there is a large number that we don't know of.
Mm. I also understand that some of these children have been adopted by Russian families.
Well, yes, what happens is they are taken into kind of camps, and then this whole process of Russification starts. So they are being told, your parents don't care about you. Nobody in Ukraine cares about you. We are the only ones looking after you, caring for your health and, your well-being and everything. and we don't know exactly how long they stay there. But what happens then is that Russian families get paid to go into those camps and select a child and adopt it, and then their names and birth dates get changed and you never find them. So this first phase is really critical if you want to take the children back to Ukraine. You have to manage that you reach them in that camp.
Well, I think for somebody listening, it's kind of hard to believe that that would be happening. And I'm wondering, I know you're not Ukrainian or Russian, but I'm wondering if you have any insight into what the motivation is to, as you said, Russify the children.
Well, I think it's it has been in history a kind of conducting war, and it's taking the future of a nation away. And I think that's what's happening, and that's the purpose behind it. And as you say, we don't know.
Now, can you say a little bit more about the actions that we are all Ukrainians are taking? There's chapters in Europe, there's chapters in the United States. What are the specific actions that you're taking?
So We Are All Ukrainians is part of a coalition around those children. And there is at least 3 parties involved. That's the Ukrainian government. They have like the records and the data and the, all the legal documents to prove who a child is. And then there is a Ukrainian NGO, Safe Ukraine, who are very well connected in the area. They know the people, and they are able to conduct those rescue missions. And we probably talk about that later, how a rescue mission
Well, no, let's talk
is
about that
conducted.
now. What
Okay.
does a rescue mission look like?
Well, so they get in touch with the children once they have found them. They stay in communication with the children. There is children that actually say, I don't want to leave, and then there is nothing you can do, but that's a minority. And then they get in contact with the parents and the family, and they need to find a first-grade family member, and it can't be a parent that's in the army. So mostly it's grandmothers, sisters, and they get prepared to travel to Russia and to those camps in groups and to get the children back. So that is what the NGO, the Ukrainian NGO, Save Ukraine, is doing. And neither the government nor Save Ukraine has the money to fund those missions. And that is where We Are All Ukrainians comes in. So we raise the money, give everything to raise the money, which is about $3,000 per child for the rescue missions, and raise the money for the psychological and medical support the families need after the child is returned.
I want to explore a little bit about what led you to participate in this, because you have an experience with your mother, that we talked about in the introduction to the podcast, and her experience during the war. Um, how does that connect you to We're All Ukrainians?
Well, I was born in 1961 in Germany, which was 16 years after the end of World War II. And my whole generation, we are all children of war children. My mother was between 4 and 10. Sorry, I just had to calculate between 4 and 10 during the war. And she lost her father. And depending on where you lived in Germany, there was a completely different experience. My father lived on the countryside, like in the woods. He didn't realize that something like war was going on. He had a childhood period. My mother lived in a small town that was like on the way the planes with the bombs took to Berlin and back. And her city got, I think, something like 80% destroyed. And she used to tell us children how it was to like go to bed with all your clothes on, with your boots on, with a hat and, everything, and a suitcase besides your bed, going to sleep, waiting for the alarms to go off, grab your suitcase and run to the next, I don't know the English word, where you find shelter.
An air raid shelter?
Mhm. Yes. Yes. And, that whole the generation of my grandmother, there were no men in my whole family. My grandmother had 4 sisters, no men, except for one. And he didn't have to go to war because he was injured in World War One. And that was the only male elderly person we had in the family.
And having listened to those stories, what is it about the mission of We're All Ukrainians that called to you?
Well, I was clear. For me, it was like impossible to have another war. And it occurred as if it was my like duty as a German to do anything I could for peace. And it was, I have tears in my eyes. It was a big threat.
Yeah.
To that.
I think for a lot of people, Americans that might be listening to this, or people that are not from Europe, it's hard to appreciate that it's actually very close.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how far is Kiev from where you live in Germany?
It's something like 700 kilometers. I don't know how much miles that is, probably 500. It's not far.
Yeah, and that would, for somebody living in the United States, that would be like if you live in Miami, Florida, a war taking place in Atlanta, Georgia, or if you
Yes.
lived in Atlanta, Georgia, a war taking place in Washington, D.C., or between San Francisco and Los Angeles. It's I don't know if you can articulate this, but I just wonder, you talk about being a German and growing up in the years after relatively recent World War, the sense of obligation for causing peace. What's it like to have this happening now on European soil?
Well, it's a big threat. It occurs as a huge failure. Yeah, it's like,
Mhm.
and it's almost impossible to listen to politicians and media that seem to only talk about weapons that need to be delivered, where, we as people here, we just want to stop this.
Mm.
Yes. And it's hard to really make, talk about that experience. But, I remember, like, really it's like my first memory. I was a small child. I was probably 3.5, my brother 1.5. And we woke up because there was loud noise outside. And it sounded like bombs. And I don't know where a 3.5-year-old should know what bombs sound from. But it was so clear, it's war. And my brother and I were panicking.
Mm.
My parents were walking my grandmother home. We were sound asleep. They left home for like 10 minutes and a firework went off. But my brother and I, we were clear, this is war. We,
Mm.
we went underneath the bed. We covered our ears. We were screaming.
Well, you're touching on something that I think is worth exploring. That the trauma that people experience in the aftermath of war can pass through multiple generations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And I wonder if you see a connection, or not a connection, but I wonder if you can say something about how We're All Ukrainians is impacting that phenomenon.
Um, well,
Let me ask it a different way.
okay.
Given that phenomenon exists of war
Mm-hmm.
having a legacy that spans multiple generations, um, how can the work that you're doing make a difference with that?
Well, so first of all, I think the biggest difference between now and in the past, when my mother was a child or was a young woman and we were children, nobody would talk about it. They would tell their kids the story, but not like that they had thought about it, or, it was just the experience. And what we're trying to do is really support people to get their experience so complete that they don't have to pass it on unconsciously to the generations to come. And
Mm.
that's why psychological help and support is so important. And in Germany in the 50s and 60s, you better get over it.
Yeah.
And that was it. It was just normal, you know. Everybody had to deal with it, so better.
Well, the other thing that I hear is resilience.
Mm-hmm.
Like that generational resilience. Like there's something that your mother and where she was and what she experienced, she got as in the domain of resilience that your father, who didn't have the same childhood growing up, wasn't necessarily afforded. He may have it in a different way, but there's like a strength. There's I'm thinking in there are other times that something like this has happened in the past, right? Whether it's to cultures, races, religions, right? Subgroups of people that things like this are happening, particularly with the children, because we do know the children are the future. They are who is going to rebuild. They are who is going to, endure. And what I hear there is also something, because it's not a right now. You can't see it right now. This is going to be a down the road impact. Right? So how do you point to that? How do you get people involved and interested now in something that won't manifest until like the actual impact or damage, consequences of, when you have a gap in the generation of Ukrainians causing the future of Ukraine? I hear is also something that can be a way the organization can make a difference now.
That provokes something for me, Christine. As somebody who's led landmark programs, and there's a commitment in landmark programs for people to be able to, as we say, put the past in the past and really invent a future that inspires you, that's an authentic invention. And so many of the skills in leading the self-expression and leadership program that you have and that you train people in, how does that come into play in the work that you're doing?
Well, where do I start?
Anywhere.
Well, it's kind of all over the place. I could have started being engaged like that 30 years ago. And I didn't. I kind of couldn't, because there was always a barrier. Something like, you need to be somebody extraordinary. You need to be nominated. Somebody needs to come up to you and say, you are the one. Stuff like that. And, for me, being able to engage like that is always connected to putting the past in the past and creating an authentic possibility, because it doesn't come naturally. I'm actually quite shy. Or I don't think of myself as somebody who can do that. And then I have very strong points of view when it comes to politics. So I couldn't just engage with any organization in the past. And, it's through my participation that I really got, points of view lead to wars. So I better give it up and start, where something is in front of me.
Yeah. You said something that's just so profound. points of view lead to wars.
Mhm.
And, all of that complexity that seems to lead from one thing to the next thing to the next thing to suddenly a state of war existing, it really is at the core of it an unwillingness to give up your attachment to a particular point of view. And that's,
Mhm.
anybody that's been through war, I don't say that with any disrespect for the impact and the experience, but we're in a conversation for preventing something in the future right now. And um you're highlighting something that I think is a common experience that many people have right now, which is a sense of a lack of agency with world events. To say it a different way, a sense of powerlessness to be able to impact things that are going on.
Mhm.
And I can hear that you've really, to use an Americanism, you've dealt with yourself about it. You have um, had a really authentic look at whether you want to stay on the outside looking in or get involved. And I'm wondering if you know, have anything that you'd want to say or share with somebody who is dealing with that sense of powerlessness or tired of just being at the effect of the worry that so many world events produce. What would you say to them? Having made the journey that you have.
Mm. Well, I would actually say, um, just get started. Every journey begins with the first step, and you have to go out and take that first step, and it'll lead you somewhere. You will be someplace different than before. Um, and when I started, I didn't know that it would come down to rescuing Ukrainian children. I just knew coming out of COVID, just COVID over and the next crisis happening. And I was like so fed up with sitting there, having my points of views and just being the victim. And I just grabbed the first occasion that my help was needed or that I saw I could. I had a friend, and her best friend was the manager of two boxers, the Klitschko brothers. I don't know whether they are known in America or not. In Europe, they are quite famous. They are Ukrainian, and one of them is the mayor of Kiev. So she was naturally in the conversation, and starting something, and I just went along.
Well, let's go back. For people that want to participate in this, and we'll talk about we're all Ukrainians. For people who want to participate in this, let's paint a little bit more of a detailed picture of what their participation actually makes possible. So one of the things I have a question about is how do they find the children to go and rescue? Like, what's the process?
Yes. So I don't know everything in detail because some of it is, behind the scenes because it's such a fragile
Yeah, let's not let
construct.
people know what we're doing that's working.
Yes, and anything can be destroyed. Like when we started to provide help to Ukraine, we had this cooperation with German Bahn, and we had what we call a Schienenbrücke. So, like constant flow of stuff with trains, and the trains got bombed, and the railways got destroyed, so there's a bit caution there. But what's happening is that the Ukrainian government, some like official department, in Ukraine, they collect records, like parents telling them, my child went on vacation and didn't come back, telling them, we're living in occupied territory, troops came and, hit our door, destroyed it, just walked in, took the father away and the children. People, stuff like that. They collect the data and they match it with their records, like birth certificates and everything you have as a State Department. And then they talk to Save Ukraine. They have regular meetings, and then they try to find out where the children are. And Ukrainian children have mobile phones, and they take them with them. So that's the way to track them, find them, and get in contact.
How many children have been rescued, to your knowledge?
Between 700 and 800.
Mm. And what, for the people that actually go to the Russian territory to find these children and bring them back, what are some of the challenges they experience?
Well, it's dangerous for Ukrainians to go to Russia. So you cannot cross the border between Ukraine and Russia. So you take all the way around, you go through Poland and Belarus and places like that. Save Ukraine all needs people on the border that let them pass. That's kind of not so
You
easy.
mean there's people that specific people they have to go to be able to pass through the borders.
Yes, and it's even Russian soldiers that secure the borders, and I don't know.
Well, there must be Russian people that are participating to support these efforts too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they are. There are, yeah. But it all needs to be.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's got to be dangerous for them as well.
Yes.
Now, what about the process of a child coming back, like getting them out of the country?
Well, the thing is, as soon as that family member enters the camp and the child recognizes them and runs into their arms, nobody's going to stop them from leaving.
But
that kind
in
of
many
works.
cases, the parents are making this journey to the camps themselves.
No, not in many cases, because they are an age that have to be soldiers, and no soldier can, you cannot leave Ukraine and go into Russia. You will immediately be arrested.
Is that true for both men
Women
and
and men? Yes.
Mm.
That's why another, like you said, a grandparent, a sister,
Yeah.
somebody who's too old
Too
to
old or too
or
young.
too
Yes.
young, who's
Mhm.
a family member has to be the one to go and locate the
Yes.
child.
Mhm.
And I would
Now,
imagine that the financial situations of majority of the families is not the best. It is one where the travel, even to get the stuff they need to travel all the way around to then go and do whatever they need to do, is another thing or another way people can support and help in the cause, is all those travel expenses.
well, yeah,
Yes.
that's great, Christine. Why don't let's talk about like what are some of the material ways that people can support this effort?
Well, actually, the best thing is money, because that is what Ukraine is fought on. They are paying for a war, and it is the travel expenses. It is the team that there is people accompany going with the family members. They are very well prepared, because it is dangerous. You need to know what to say and what not to say. You really need to be like strong and
Very, yeah,
clear.
very strong-willed,
Yes.
very
Yeah.
resilient.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Um, and then we're all Ukrainians, exist in multiple countries, registered NGOs in multiple countries. What are those countries?
Well, I only know like our so there's two countries in which the organization I work with are registered. One is in Germany,
Hmm.
and in Germany we are, or we have been, like we started the day when Putin went into Ukraine with our work, and then like in the months after did the legal work to actually become an NGO. And we were like the first ones to really have solid connections in Ukraine.
Mm.
Like the big NGOs would come and say, listen, we have this money, or we have this and that we could donate, but we just don't know whom to give it to so that it reaches the right people. And we had these connections. So we were just like bringing people together and collecting money and supplies. And, I was in the logistical team when we started off. I was filling out papers so that the stuff could cross the border, and I would have phone calls with logistical companies and stuff like that. So that
Mm.
was how we started,
So that's
and
Germany.
that's Germany. And we're still doing like a whole variety of projects, and rescuing the children is one of those projects. And that became like not my project, but then I got connected through another landmark participant with people in the United States who wanted to start to be engaged. And then we found the sister organization, We Are All Ukrainians USA.
Got it. Okay.
And I'm in the American organization. I'm in the board, and I'm the only German, the only from the mother organization working
Mm.
there, because it's, I have the connection to the people.
Um, Before we wrap up, I want to go back to something we talked about earlier about don't know how to say it exactly, but, really kind of giving up being unwilling to do something. I don't know, that's like a double negative, but
Mhm.
you're just getting up and doing something, and what led you to that. And I'm wondering if there's anything that you would share with anybody about the difference it makes for you personally to have gotten into action on something that is needed and you're so passionate about.
Mm. Well, I think the main thing is I never, ever in my life felt as a victim as much as during COVID. And I saw the effects like on my grandchildren that, I had 2 or 3 grandchildren at that time that had just started school and then went into homeschooling and that whole drama. And my parents in in their elderly home, senior, where they lived. I couldn't go there and all that stuff, businesses closing down. I felt like really a victim and I had very strong points of view and I couldn't do anything. And it was so annoying. I mean, I can't describe it. It was just the most horrible time in my life. And it wasn't, but this part of it, being a victim and not being able to do anything. And I knew, not again. No ways, not again.
Hmm.
And that's like the effect on me. I'm not a victim anymore.
Mm.
I'm doing something. And since I'm doing something, I can kind of start to play around with all kinds of points of view. And I can come to a point where I say, well, my game is to end this conversation about good and bad in the world because it just doesn't work. And it makes it so, we are so, how do you say that? Like we relate to the bad peoples as if they weren't human. And I think, this not relating to someone as a human being is the big problem, at
Yeah.
least in my eyes.
Yeah.
And I started to relate to people as a fellow human being.
Mm.
And they matter, and every child matters.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
One other question before we wrap up. 100 years from now, none of us will be here. Nobody is participating in this conversation right now, and is likely to remember it. They won't be here. We'll all be gone. And I'm wondering what you want people to say about you when you're no longer here.
I don't know whether I want people to think of me in 100 years. I'm not that important. And yes, I think this relating to anybody as a fellow human being.
Thank you.
Thank you. What a great opportunity. I never heard me say something like that before.
Well, that's very inspiring, very moving.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Landmark Difference Makers. If you're inspired by what you heard and you want to learn more about Landmark's programs or explore upcoming episodes, visit landmarkforumnews.com to find resources, event details, and more stories of people making extraordinary impact around the globe. If you are already a part of the Landmark community, check out the Landmark subscription, designed to provide ongoing support in creating a life you love. Visit landmarkworldwide.com to learn more. Until next time, keep creating, keep contributing, and keep making a difference.